And it's about ready. I don't know if you can see here on the screen, but I've got about, say about 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch of space shown, and I'm going to use that. That's going to be my icing right there. That kind of gauges me already where I'm going with this icing. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to get ready to ice it. I'm going to get rid of some of these crumbs. Set that aside for now. It is nice and pretty, and it's nicely cleaned up. No more crust, and it won't be tough at all in the mouth. When you go to eat it, it'll seem soft and very pleasant to eat, just like this thing would be if you cut the crust off with a sandwich. All right, so are we ready for icing?
Nope.
No. I've got rock hard buttercream here. Rock hard buttercream is not going to spread very easily. In fact, if I tried, it would just be, I'd have to put so much force into it, I'd tear the cake. So we have to reconstitute our buttercream. And the way we're going to do that is by heating it up a little bit and re-whipping it. Let me take some of this buttercream here. And I'm just going to kind of break this up into pieces. This is just rock hard. It's made of butter, after all, so it's going to start to break down. I mean, it's going to start to break very easily when you start to agitate it because it is hard icing. But it's still full of air from when it was originally buttercream. And because of that, it's fairly easy to break up and work with. So let's just take all this out of here, put it in our mixing bowl. And we're going to whip this back up to its original splendor. But if I just throw this on the mixer, it's not going to whip up very easily. It's still really cold, so I've got to warm it up a little bit. There's a couple ways you can reconstitute buttercream. One, you can bring it up the night before and let it come up to room temperature, and then put it on the mixer and re-whip it. And that's great. That works if you have that kind of time. Let's say, you've got the time, you plan ahead for the next day, and you pull it out ahead of time. That's great. But most of us don't have that kind of time. So there's a quicker way. And what we're going to do is we're going to put it here on the fire. You can put it on the fire back there too. And we're going to warm it up. You can melt up to about 20% of your icing and still have it whip up just nice. If you melt more than 20 to 25% of it, you may end up never being able to whip it at all. But you can melt some. And what I like is that it will help loosen up your buttercream and make it able to whip back up to its original fluffiness. We want to get it up to fluffy again. And we are going to use a whip, not a paddle. If you use the paddle, you'll find out, I think the hard way, that it will knock all the air out of your buttercream. You'll end up with this yellow mixture that looks like butter. And that's basically what you've done. Is if you use a paddle, you'll basically be returning back just to butter. A very sweet butter, but still, it'll be the texture of butter. And I personally like light, fluffy buttercream on my cakes. I'm not much into this thick, heavy, icing like you would find if you just spread butter on it. So I'm going to try to keep that fluff going. You can see it moving around in here probably. You guys can see that moving around, but it's sliding around in there. It's starting to melt. I'm trying not to melt too fast or too much. I want to just get kind of a little pool of liquid at the bottom, about 20% of the total buttercream. Now, yesterday a lot of people put theirs on the fire and then they brought it back over to the mixer and they whipped it, and it didn't come up very good. It came up looking sort of like cottage cheese, like yellow cottage cheese. And that's a sure sign that you haven't warmed it up enough, right? It's still too hard, and it gets like cottage cheese texture. So what you do is take it back to the fire, warm it up a little more, and then whip it some more, and you'll find it'll start getting fluffy again. But undoubtedly, one or two of you will probably have that same problem today. You'll probably get it where it's not quite warm enough, and that's pretty normal. Are there any questions so far? No?
If you wanted to add extra flavor to your buttercream, would the re-whipping stage be the time to do it?
That would be the time to do it. Yeah, when you're reconstituting like this, it would be a great time to add flavoring. Let's say you wanted to add chocolate to it. You know, you could melt a little bit of chocolate. The best way to add chocolate, because chocolate is kind of a very particular ingredient, you want to make sure the chocolate is not hot because it will melt the butter. So you want to make sure that it's about the same temperature as your buttercream. So melt it, really cool down a little bit. When it's down to about in the 90s, around 90, 95 degrees, you can add your buttercream and it'll mix in beautifully. Just whip it in there. It's made of fat too. It's made of cocoa butter. So it should mix very nicely with the butter that's in there and make for a really nice chocolate buttercream. Of course, the more chocolate you put in, the more chocolatey your buttercream will be. Okay, check your speed. This is speed number 3, and it's going to go pretty quick. You'll notice your buttercream changes quite a bit when it gets like this. All of a sudden you'll hear a sound, it'll start to sound different when it starts getting fluffy. It starts slapping more. It starts sounding like it's got more air in it. And that's what we're looking for. We're looking for a nice, you know, aerated buttercream. Stop it there. I don't know if you guys can see the difference here, but it's fluffy buttercream again. And all I do is melt some of it and whip it back up. If you suspect that it's still kind of heavy, then whip it more. Because when you whip on your icing, you're going to get more mileage out of that icing. It's going to go further. You're going to be able to get more, you're going to ice more cake with it because it has air in it. And remember, if you're icing with just butter, it'll only go so far, and then after that, you can make more. And that, you know, if you don't have to make more, it's nice not to have to make more. So I think that it's better to, you know, whip it well the first time. The way you'll know for sure is by the color. The color of your buttercream should be about as white as buttercream could ever be. Really, it's sort of a cream color. But you'll know if it's under whipped because it'll be distinctly yellow. It'll have a really yellow color to it, and that tells me right away, okay, it needs more time. But whip it. Don't worry that it's going to be under whipped because it will, or over whipped rather, because it will be just fine. Chances are we won't have any problems with over whipping. I'm going to go and whip this just a tiny bit more. I think it's a little bit firm yet. And let's give it a little bit more. I want it to be nice and soft. I can feel the bowl is still kind of chilly, still kind of cool. That's doing much better. I can see it in there.